Seal the east loading bay, Evan Kroll said, and write down the name of anyone who touches that table before 5:30. The steel door descended with a grinding shudder that rolled across the polished floor. Cold air slipped under it. Old machine oil, wax, and iron dust hung beneath the white event lights. At 8:10 that morning, Emmett Shaw stood outside a brass barrier while the final casting of his career rested 12 feet away. The oval iron table was nearly 14 feet long and dark as cooled coal. A new placard named it the Foundry Legacy Table and listed the Grayhaven Renewal Trust as custodian. Above it, a silver sponsor sign covered most of the old pattern loft wall. 16 pale screw holes remained where Emmett Shaw, master pattern maker, had once been mounted. Evan closed a gray folder beneath one arm. The opening ceremony begins at 5:30. We cannot permit an unapproved removal. Emmett unfolded his 6-foot wooden rule, measured the turn toward the sealed bay, and marked 2 short lines on the floor with white chalk. His sleeve pulled back, exposing the old burn along his left forearm. "It isn't removal," he said. "It's return." 2 council members exchanged a look. One had already told the event staff that Emmett was struggling to accept the Foundry's new purpose. Another said the trust had saved the building, as though saving the walls settled ownership of everything inside them. Evan pointed toward the civil security officers near the entrance. "The table has remained here for years. It is included in the building contents. You do not have authority to take it." Emmett crouched beside the iron without crossing the barrier. He slid the end of his rule beneath the base. Thick black vibration pads separated the table from clean concrete. There were no bolts, no anchorplats. Beneath the oval frame, 12 rectangular channels crossed from side to side. Event workers had polished around them without asking what they were for. Evan followed his gaze. "A forklift can move it later if the board approves." Emmett rose slowly, flexing his arthritic fingers around the rule. A forklift was never meant to carry it out. Then what was? Evan asked. Emmett looked toward the closed loading bay and then to the tall windows facing the abandoned rail line. The people it was made for. Outside, beyond the brick wall, one low-engine note entered the dead-end road. A second joined it, then a third. By the time Evan turned toward the windows, the question was no longer whether someone had come for the table, but why Emmett had insisted that no machine could finish the job. The motorcycles arrived in pairs, not as a wall of noise. Each pair slowed at the Foundry gate, crossed the cracked asphalt, and parked beside the dry canal before shutting down. Within 6 minutes, 84 adult riders stood beside their machines in canvas jackets, faded denim, and work boots. Their engines were silent. Their hands were empty. That order unsettled the ceremony staff more than shouting would have. At the front stood May Kellen, 58, broad-shouldered and steady, with steel-gray hair cut at her jaw. Her burgundy touring motorcycle rested behind her, its black metal cases dusted from the county road. A pale scar crossed the knuckle of her right thumb. 2 riders unfastened a low trailer and rolled 12 ash poles onto wooden blocks. Each pole carried 7 chalk marks. A councilwoman watched through the entry glass and said, "He brought a club." Evan repeated the phrase to security, giving it the weight of an official concern. Emmett heard him and lowered his eyes. He had not called anyone to intimidate Grayhaven. 3 days earlier, he had sent May only 4 words. They took the name. The work is next. Inside, people had already decided what kind of man he was. An aging tradesman clinging to an object because the town had moved on. A former employee confusing service with ownership. A lonely old man using bikers to create pressure he could not create alone. May entered by herself. Her brown-red canvas jacket was darker at the elbows, and a small brass whistle hung beneath the collar. She stopped at the barrier and looked at Evan. "Which inventory describes the table?" Evan pointed toward the placard. "The Trust's collection register. That is a display label. It reflects the collection. I asked for the inventory." A few conversations faded. May did not step closer. She counted the 12 channels beneath the base, checked the spacing with her eyes, and glanced through the doors toward the ash poles outside. Emmett remained beneath the 16 empty holes in the wall, appearing less like a master craftsman than a man who had arrived too late to object. Evan opened his folder, but removed nothing. The ownership question is being handled. May nodded. Then no one should move anything until is handled. The councilwoman relaxed, mistaking discipline for retreat. May returned outside and placed the riders into 12 groups of 7. A retired welder who had arrived by car asked to join. She thanked him but refused. The lift was designed for 84, she said. Not 83. Not 85. She then checked each ash pole for splits and marked the carrying positions again. Through the glass, Emmett watched without signaling to her. The secrecy around the table still belonged to him. The riders knew why they had come. They did not yet know why their exact number mattered. If they were not there to threaten anyone, why had Emmett built a final casting that could only be carried by 84 people? By 10 o'clock, Evan had moved the safety inspection from 4 in the afternoon to 1:30. Event workers shifted catering tables closer to the casting floor and narrowed the route toward the East Bay. A sponsor's crew began drilling into the pattern loft wall above the 16 old holes. Each burst sent a dry vibration through the bricks. The public area, Evan announced, would close at 2. Emmett now had less than 4 hours to prove a claim the trust had treated as settled for months. The pressure came in reasonable words. Insurance, scheduling, liability, guest safety. Each term sounded responsible. Together, they closed around him. Evan offered a compromise in front of the council. The trust would install a small historical panel recognizing Emmett's service if he withdrew his objection and allowed the table to remain. Your contribution would still be visible, Evan said. Emmett looked at the sponsor sign, then at the pale marks where his own name had been. A contribution is something a man chooses to give. You worked here 43 years. That does not answer who gave you the table. The councilwoman sighed, as though he had rejected generosity. Outside, the Ember Chain riders waited beside their motorcycles. Some drank coffee. Others checked straps and rubbed wax into the ash poles. May entered every 20 minutes, not to argue, but to observe what had changed. On her third visit, she noticed a trust employee placing decorative uplights around the table. Why are there vibration pads under a permanent fixture? She asked. Evan answered that the pads protected the historic floor. From what? Weight and movement. Permanent fixtures are not expected to move. The safety officer looked beneath the base. Then one council member did the same. No one responded. May shifted her attention to the shallow grips cast around the rim. There were 84 of them, each marked with a year. The first 7 read 1978, 1979, 1981, 1981, 1982, 1984, and 1984. The years continued in no production sequence. Heat records? Evans suggested. Emmett's jaw tightened. May saw it. They are not heat records, she said. Emmett folded his rule and placed it inside his blue canvas coat. No, training years. May asked. He did not answer. That silence gave Evan room to move again. He instructed the event crew to bring in 2 display cases and position them near the intended path. The route became 6 feet narrower. May measured the clearance without speaking, then looked toward the loading door. When did your insurer examine the table? Evans said the entire property had been assessed 6 months earlier. Did you classify it as fixed equipment? The report was accepted. That was not what I asked. The air in the room changed. May did not need to accuse him. She only had to keep the unanswered question visible. On the northeast corner of the table, a small casting flaw caught the overhead light. Emmett had left it unrepaired for more than a decade. May studied the years around the rim again. If they did not record production, what human history had Emmett cast into the iron? At 10:45, Emmett set a flat wooden pattern box on a chair and opened it himself. Inside lay a stained card with rounded corners and a faint crease across the middle. Across the top, in his block lettering, was written ES 84. Beneath it appeared a scaled drawing of the oval table, the 12 cross channels, and the 84 hand positions around the edge. The words portable assembly surface remained legible. Evan asked to inspect the card, then held it toward the council. This confirms Mr. Shaw designed the object, he said. It does not establish personal ownership. Employees design equipment for employers every day. The argument was strong enough to calm several people in the room. Emmett's best document seemed to prove only that he had done his job. May accepted the card back and studied it beneath the white lights. The lower corner carried a faded material note. Most of it had been rubbed away, but 3 words remained clear. Final heat, outside stock. Evan dismissed the phrase as ordinary shop language. Outside stock could mean material purchased from any supplier. It could, May said, it could also mean the Foundry never owned the metal. Ruth Vale, 66, a retired quality inspector with silver hair and a dark wool coat, had entered during the discussion. She stood near Emmett without drawing attention to herself. Evan pointed to the table's long use. Whatever the source of the iron, the object remained here, served the facility, and was never removed. That supports our position. May borrowed a flashlight from the safety officer and aimed it beneath the base. Clean concrete appeared between the 4 black pads. No old holes. No sheathed bolts. No marks from anchor plates. Portable on the card, she said. Unanchored in the floor. Your public label calls it a permanent heritage fixture. Those descriptions do not agree. Evan replied that movable equipment could still belong to the property owner. Yes, May said, but then there should be an asset entry, a purchase record, or an accepted gift. Evan closed his folder against his side. Ruth stepped forward and touched one corner of the pattern card. Her initials appeared on the reverse. I signed the final inspection. Evan turned toward her. Then you can confirm the Foundry accepted it into service. Into service, Ruth said. Not into ownership. The difference was small enough to sound technical and large enough to reopen the entire room. Emmett rotated the card and pointed to a dark rectangular shadow along the faded material note. A receipt was folded against this for years, he said. The carbon stained the paper. Evan asked where that receipt was. Emmett looked at Ruth, not May. He was beginning to choose what to reveal and when. Ruth reached inside her coat, but Emmett raised one hand. Before we show it, he said, I want the council to answer one thing. If the Foundry did not pay for the final heat, who does the town believe did? Ruth placed a narrow envelope on the chair beside the pattern box. The yellow tape released with a soft crack. Inside was a carbon receipt from a metal supplier that no longer existed. 7 equal payments were listed, each followed by a worker signature. May recognized every name. All 7 belonged to riders waiting outside. On the back, in Ruth's handwriting, were the words, 1 share per worker, no institutional claim. Evan read the page carefully. 7 payments do not establish ownership of a 3,000-pound table, he said. He was right. One receipt could not speak for 84 people. But the conflict had moved beyond Emmett's name. The iron itself had been paid for outside the Foundry. Emmett lowered himself onto the chair, his hands stiff in the cold. The company canceled the last heat, he said. They were shutting down. Management would not spend money on a table for a shop they said had no future. May looked through the glass at the riders. So the workers bought it. 7 started it, Emmett replied. Then others heard. One person brought money from weekend repair work. Another sold and used tools. Some paid $5 at a time. Others paid more, but Emmett returned every excess amount until all shares were equal. No one was allowed to own more of the table than anyone else. The final heat was poured during the last operating week, after management had removed it from the schedule. Ruth inspected it after her regular shift. The table stayed because Grayhaven had promised to open an adult trades program inside the old Foundry. That program was postponed, then quietly abandoned. For years, the table still held jigs, steel frames, and repair work brought in by former employees. Emmett did not ask for it back because it was still being used. A work table belongs where work is happening, he said. It stopped being a work table when they put a rope around it. The room no longer faced a dispute between one old worker and a redevelopment trust. It faced the concealed labor of 84 adults whose shared tool had been converted into a sponsored exhibit. May asked where the remaining receipts were. Emmett answered honestly. Scattered. Some may be gone. Evan checked his watch. The safety review begins at 1:30. Claims must be supported by verifiable records. May divided the Ember Chain Riders into search teams, but Emmett stopped her before she left. Do not tell them they owe me. I will not. Tell them the table is being mistaken for something it was never meant to be. May nodded. The goal had changed. They were no longer trying only to prove that Emmett had designed the casting. They had to prove that 84 ordinary workers had built a shared tool and never surrendered it. But if the evidence had been scattered across decades, could enough of it be gathered before Evan's deadline closed the floor? The Ember Chain Riders worked without spectacle. They opened saddlebags and took out notebooks, reading glasses, old address books, and phones with cracked screens. 2 riders drove to May's equipment shop to search archived files. 3 called retired workers who had moved out of state. Others checked tax folders, garage cabinets, and coffee tins where old receipts had been stored with fishing licenses and spare keys. May set up a simple process at one of the unused catering tables. Originals on the left, copies in the middle, verified names on the right. Ruth compared signatures with the final inspection log she had kept. Emmett supplied dates from memory, then corrected himself whenever the documents disagreed. No one treated memory as proof. By 11:30, they had 14 receipts. At noon, 49. By 12:40, 78. The final 6 belonged to members of May's old crane crew. She found their carbon copy beneath load charts in a locked filing drawer at her shop. Her scarred thumb rested on the page before she added it to the others. Emmett noticed. You kept it. I keep anything that can fall on people, she said. Weights, schedules, promises. Ruth produced a photograph from the final pour. It showed the table cooling on black pads with the 12 channels visible beneath it. The concrete was untouched. The timestamp matched the pattern card and supplier records. At 1 o'clock, all 84 contributions had been verified. May prepare to ask about the numbered years, but Emmett closed the pattern box and stood. Not here, he said. He led her, Ruth, and 2 council members to the old pattern loft stairs. Beneath a bench where he had once repaired wooden forms, he removed the brass cap from his folding rule. A narrow paper roll slid from a hollow center. He had not lost it by accident. He had carried it every day. The paper listed 84 names, each paired with one of the years cast into the table. Some years marked completion of a trade certificate. Others marked a return to skilled work after layoffs, injury, caregiving, or lost credentials. May found her own name beside 1999. You planned the hand positions around us, she said. Around what each of you survived, Emmett replied. Not what you owed me. May asked why he had hidden the list. Because gratitude can become another kind of debt when an old man displays it. He then made the decision that shifted the balance of the story. He handed the list to Ruth. Read it into the review, not as ownership, as design intent. Emmett was no longer being carried by May's strategy. He was defining how the truth would be used. The evidence now showed who paid, who designed, and why the number 84 mattered. Then Evan introduced a new risk. Long used without rent or removal demand, he argued, could still support an implied gift. The riders had proved the source of the iron. They had not yet proved why the table had remained in the Foundry without becoming its property. At 1:20, Evan came closer to winning than at any earlier point. His argument was calm and legally plausible. The table had served the Foundry for years. No owner had charged storage. No annual notice had demanded its return. No written loan agreement had yet been produced. A reasonable administrator, he said, could conclude that the workers had donated the table to the workplace where it remained. The safety inspector agreed that continuous possession mattered. Council members asked Emmett whether he had ever invoiced the Foundry. He had not. Whether he had sent a formal loan letter. He had not. Whether he had objected during the redevelopment inventory. He had been recovering from hand surgery and had not attended. Every truthful answer weakened him. The 84 receipts, which had seemed decisive an hour earlier, now appeared capable of proving generosity rather than retained ownership. Through the glass, the riders waited in the cold beside their machines. Some had closed shop for the day. Others had driven more than 200 miles. Emmett looked at them and felt the cost of his message. Let's stay, he said. The words were quiet, but final enough to release tension from Evan's face. They paid for the work. I will not make them look like they came to collect a debt. Evan offered the historical panel again. This time, Emmett did not reject it. May looked at the numbered grips, then at the list Emmett had deliberately released. The table had been designed so no one could move it alone, yet its maker was preparing to surrender it alone. She faced Evan. Read the insurance classification. Evan kept the folder beneath his hand. The insurer accepted the table within the property contents. As what? An industrial artifact. That is a description. The safety inspector turned toward him. Evan opened the folder and read the first line of an entry, then stopped. May had already seen the words below it. Temporary loan. She did not accuse him of concealment. Emmett stepped forward before she could ask another question. Ruth, he said, tell them what he said during the inspection. Ruth answered that the insurer had asked whether the trust could sell, alter, or permanently mount the table. Evan had replied that it could not, because title had never been transferred. The room tightened around that statement. Evan said the wording was provisional. Emmett pointed to the 84 riders outside, then asked the owners whether they ever gave it. May had anticipated the need. Each rider had signed a one-page authorization that morning after the receipts were verified, confirming equal ownership and consenting to transfer the table to the Grayhaven Adult Trades Workshop. 84 names. 84 signatures. No missing share. Emmett did not ask May to speak for them. He asked the safety inspector to read the authorization aloud. The receipts no longer showed only who paid. The signatures showed who still claimed the work and where they had chosen to send it. Evan still held one document that could either complete the chain or expose the trust position as indefensible. Would his own inventory admit what 84 owners had now stated together? May requested a 10-minute property review before the casting floor closed. The councilwoman approved because allowing uncertainty to continue into the evening would expose the trust more than delaying the ceremony. May did not stand at the head of the table. She gave that place to Emmett. He arranged the evidence in the order the work had happened. First came the canceled Foundry heat order, then the 84 equal share receipts. Next came the ES 84 pattern card marked portable assembly surface and outside stock. Ruth placed the cooling photograph after it, showing the black pads, clean concrete, and 12 lifting channels. Emmett laid down the hidden list of 84 names and explained that it documented design intent, not obligation. May added the signed authorization from all 84 owners directing the table to the Adult Trades Workshop. One empty space remained. That belongs to the insurance inventory, Emmett said. Evan did not move. Emmett began asking the questions himself. Ruth, did the Foundry pay for the metal? No. Was the table entered into the company asset ledger? No. Did management accept a formal gift? No. Did any of the 84 owners authorize permanent display? No. The safety inspector examined the base. Would fixed equipment usually have 12 designed lift channels and no anchors? Not in this setting. Emmett nodded toward the ash poles waiting beyond the barrier. 2 riders carried them inside and laid them parallel to the channels. Their dimensions matched the pattern drawing within 1/8 of an inch. They did not insert them. Not yet. May checked the authorization signatures against the receipt list. Ruth verified the inspection photograph. Emmett used chalk to mark the table's 4 original support points, showing temporary placement rather than a foundation footprint. Then he faced Evan. Read the complete inventory entry. The sponsor's drill above the loft had stopped. Air moved through the heating vent. The old building seemed to wait with them. Evan opened the folder and read. Movable object on temporary loan. Ownership documentation pending. Excluded from sale, permanent alteration, or structural attachment. Emmett asked whose signature appeared below the entry. Mine, Evan said. Was title transferred after that date? No. Did the trust receive a bill of sale? No. A gift acceptance? No. A board resolution accepting the object? No. Emmett placed the signed owner authorization into the empty space. The chain was complete. Evan's position had depended on treating uncertainty as ownership. His own document treated uncertainty as a reason the trust could not claim, sell, alter, or attach the table. The safety inspector requested a final look beneath the rim. A flashlight revealed the maker's mark. Yes/final heat/84. It matched the card. Emmett stepped back. He had not demanded applause, an apology, or restoration of his name. He had asked the evidence to speak in the order the work had been done. Evan's hand rested beside the barrier hook. Would he open the path, or force the council to watch him hold an object 84 documented owners had just directed elsewhere? Evan looked at the insurance entry, then at the 84 signatures, and finally at the sponsor sign above the old screw holes. He unfastened the brass hook and moved the barrier aside. Record the table as released to its documented owners, he told the safety inspector. The room did not erupt. A few people exhaled, others lowered their eyes. May called the riders inside in 12 groups of 7. Each person took the hand position corresponding to a year on Emmett's list. The ash poles entered the channels with a dry wooden scrape. May checked every grip, shoulder, boot, and line of sight. At the 4th pole, she stopped the entire process. Cal, a retired mechanic, had tucked his thumb beneath the rim. May moved his hand into the open grip and made him repeat the safe position. Only then did she lift the brass whistle. Emmett walked the route with his folding rule and chalk. He marked the narrow turn near the catering tables, the loading bay threshold, and the exact place where the trailer waited. His hands could not carry the weight, but the path belonged to him. May raised one hand. 84 back settled. The whistle gave one short note. The 3,108-pound table rose from its black pads. The pads remained on clean concrete, untouched by bolts. Leather creaked. Saws moved in measured half-steps. No one spoke. The table crossed the casting floor, while late sunlight entered through the opened east bay and lit the numbered grips around its edge. At the threshold, the front left group drifted less than an inch. Emmett tapped one chalk mark with the end of his rule. May corrected the line, counted 3 quiet beats, and the casting cleared the door. Outside, the riders carried it beyond the brick apron before lowering it onto the trailer supports. The promise of the title had been fulfilled plainly. The town had erased Emmett Shaw's name from the Foundry. 84 bikers had carried out his final casting. By 5:26 p.m., the table stood inside the Grayhaven Adult Trades workshop across town. When it was tilted for the legs to be fitted, May found the words cast beneath the surface. And no one carries the work alone. She read them once, then reached for a wrench. Emmett chose where the old wooden pattern sign would hang above the workshop entrance. He did not ask Evan to restore his name at the Foundry. He asked the trust for something else, corrected ownership records, a public note acknowledging the 84 worker shares, and permanent authority for Ruthvale to review every historical label before display. Evan agreed. It was not humiliation. It was a transfer of control from branding back to evidence. The 16 screw holes remained visible beneath the sponsor sign. At the workshop, Emmett mixed chalk dust with oil, drew the first square layout on the dark iron surface, and handed the chalk to the first adult trainee waiting beside him. The table was not placed behind a rope. By the following morning, it held clamps, steel stock, and a half-finished frame. Emmett's name hung over a room where work had started again. The Foundry had kept the wall. He had chosen where the future would stand. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more biker stories. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and reflection. Any resemblance to real people, places, organizations, clubs, or events is purely coincidental.